Hey there poetry pals, welcome back to another video. This week there are 2,000 of you. There are 2,000 of you, and so I thought I would give you a Q&A so we can get to know each other a little better. But for those of you who are watching in the future, you'll know that it's Halloween week. It is Halloween on Saturday. Today is Thursday. It is a Bones Day, so we are multitasking today. So I'm going to be filming my video, I'm going to be answering your questions whilst making my Halloween outfit. I got a free pattern online which I need to stick together, then I need to cut out the pattern, then I need to cut out the pattern on the fabric, and then I need to sew the fabric together. You're probably just going to be here for the cutting out of the outfit. It's Bones Day! Hi, if you're new here, my name's Josie Alford and I make videos about all things poetry. Make sure you subscribe for weekly videos on all things poetry and some things that aren't. And while we're on the subject, why don't you follow me on social media? I am at Josie Alford Poet on all the things. 2,000 subscribers. Pretty good. But we're crafting, I'm wearing skinny jeans, it's not that comfortable, so let me slip into something more comfortable. Absolutely no idea how that transition's gonna work, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, first question. What was the first video you've ever put up and what was it about? Hopefully it gets answered and for the channel to grow even more. Well, with you on that one, love the channel to grow even more. Honestly, the fact that there are people who want to watch my videos is crazy. Now, the first video this account ever uploaded to YouTube, I accidentally deleted it recently. It's been on private for a long time, but it was a video of my little sister with her hair wrapped in cling film because she was doing a treatment on her hair, and she was dancing to Single Ladies by Beyonce, and she'd filmed it on my old laptop webcam and decided, I know what I'm going to do with this. I'm going to upload it to YouTube. And she uploaded it to my YouTube. Yeah, so my first actual poetry related video is a video, and it's still up, you can go and watch it if you want. It's of my first time ever slamming with a poem called 3 Hours to Go, and it's about my first full-time job. And it's filmed on, so it was uploaded 5 years ago, and let me tell you, it looks like it's been filmed on a phone that was at least 10 years old. It looks awful, but it's on there. But yeah, so that's the first one. But the first one, oh my god, the Justin Bieber one's only the third one. But the first videos I actually made for YouTube, not just poetry performance videos, is about doing Stoptober, when I gave up smoking and drinking for a month as a bid to raise money. And it worked. I raised a good amount of money for it. Still drink and smoke though, so didn't work out that well. Okay, next question. Hi Josie, love watching your videos and particularly enjoyed your most recent one about paying to submit. It was nice to know I'm not the only one who thinks about this topic. You can watch it, go watch it. I was wondering what your opinion was on the conversation about accessibility in poetry, specifically to do with what language and techniques you are using. I've been told that to use more colloquial language and more obvious poetic techniques is actually just patronising to those of us who might not have been formally trained in poetry, but my gut instinct tells me that making poetry more accessible is normally a good thing. Thank you for the videos. Well, thank you for your comment, Jem. This is a really interesting question. I'm not gonna lie, I went through these this morning so that I could get thinking, and when it comes to accessibility in poetry, accessibility is a really interesting word because it's not just about making like the language accessible, it's making poetry performances accessible and stuff like that. But I know what you're getting at, Jem, so I'm gonna speak on that. And I write incredibly easy to understand poems. What you see is what you get with my poems. They are not complicated at all. I personally use language that I would use in every day. And that being said, I am also really rather well educated. I know that sounds big-headed, but it's also true. Personally, I think it depends on the context in which you're presenting your poems. I think that if you're only ever going to be performing your poems, then they need to be, at least at some basic level, they need to be understandable in temporary times. There's this thing within academic poetry to think that like spoken word is really simple, but actually that's not necessarily the case. What they're doing is something quite complicated, which is getting your meaning across in a temporary situation. Like your meaning has to get across in the time that it takes you to perform that poem. And then your poem's over. People can't go back to your poem unless it's videoed, but like, let's just talk about in the context of performance, you know? Whereas when you're reading a poem and you've got it written, you've got it in a book, you can read it through once and then you can read it through again, and then you've got the words in front of you which you can Google. You can like Google your references if you don't immediately get them straight away. Whereas like when someone's speaking, the words are there and then they're gone. I personally don't think that accessible poetry is a bad thing. I think that calling it accessible is maybe not the right phrase. I think that as long as, and this applies to almost any opinion I have about poetry ever, but as long as your form reflects your content and your intention for the poem, as long as meaning can be found and the form does what it's supposed to, then I think that it's fine. If you're trying to write a poem with a load of like historical references, like classic references or stuff like that, then that, and the joy of the poem, the art of the poem lies in those references, then only people who understand those references are going to get it. So true skill comes in writing a poem that has the references that like people are going to get anyway. And I do not think there's any shame in writing poetry that doesn't have classical literature references in it. I think there's no shame in writing poems that are easy to understand. Poetry is a key part of how we connect with people and how we understand the world. And if we can't understand the poems, how the hell are we supposed to understand the world? God, this could be a whole video on itself, this question. I don't think there's a problem with using obvious poetic techniques, as long as they're used well. I think I get more offended by people writing shit poetry than I do people writing accessible poetry, and I don't think those are the same thing. Okay, another question. Which poet or book do you actually love but think no one would expect you to love? I don't know. I don't think I'm that complex. I think I'm quite easy to understand and predict. I think when it comes to poetry, I think I'm an open book, really. I like most poetry, if I'm honest. The only poetry I don't like is when it's bad. But I can tell you my favourite poem of all time, and then I think that's shocking. I think people might expect me to go for something spoken wordy, maybe, or something classic. But no, my favourite poem of all time is Words Wide Night by Carol Ann Duffy. I just really like it. It starts with the lines, "Somewhere on the other side of this wide night, I am thinking of you." I just like it. Just really like it. I think my taste in books, as in like not poetry books, is maybe more interesting. So like, I've done, you know, I did an English lit degree, I've done a creative writing masters, I specialise in poetry, done a heck load of classical literature reading, and my favourite genre is like dystopian sci-fi and fantasy. Ooh, love it. But like one of my favourite books is World War Z, which I guess people might not predict about me. World War Z is kind of like a concept album, but with short stories. No, it's a novel, but it's also short stories. But is it? Nothing like the film starring Brad Pitt. I don't hate the Brad Pitt movie. It's just not that, you know? My next question is, what would you say is the most challenging thing about being self-employed? Earning money? No, I think for me, the most challenging thing is being motivated every day. Even though I worked from home, you know, during the pandemic and stuff like that, it's a lot to be self-motivating and do this every day. So I think that's my biggest challenge, is that being self-motivated. Because sometimes, you know, the flexibility of working for yourself is great, because you're like, oh, well, today I'm going to actually run some errands and whatever, but it's very easy for you to get caught up in the oh, well, you know, this bit needs cleaning, or I need to go and get my hair cut or whatever, and then you don't actually get any work done. Just me? If anyone got any tips on that, by all means, give me your tips. Okay, next question. What has been your most difficult job since going 100% freelance? Yeah, it was probably a video that I was making for a client. And it had been something that had been on my radar for 3 months. And they said they wanted it to be out for World Mental Health Day. And I was like, great, yeah, absolutely. And it was just an editing job. I didn't need to film it. It was all pre-recorded. All I had to do was edit it, caption it. All I had to do. To edit the video, caption it, and then they wanted it to go out on loads of different platforms, so I needed to optimize the video for those platforms. So it wasn't a short job. It was definitely like, it would be a long day, but it'd be a day. A couple of weeks before it was due, they still hadn't agreed on a quote, and I said, well, you know, this is my quote, and then they were like, oh, we're going to do it internally, don't worry about it. So I was like, fine, whatever, and carried on about my work, like working on different projects and stuff like that. And then 3 working days before the deadline, they came back to me and asked me to get it done. And when I started it, it turns out what they'd asked for wasn't what they actually needed. And it ended up being a whole lot more work for less pay than what they'd agreed to pay me. And during that, I had turned down work. So I guess that was the hardest. Not necessarily in terms of like job complexity, but definitely in terms of my own sanity. So that's nice. Advice for dealing with freelance clients, pop them in the comments below, why don't you? So the next question was, what is your proudest moment as a poet and video maker? So my proudest moment as a poet would have been winning the Hip Yak Slam. It's the first time I had ever won a slam by myself, and it meant that I got to go to WOMAD and perform at WOMAD. So that was cool. I'll admit the imposter syndrome was high in the moment, but I think looking back at it, I'm pretty proud of that. The other thing would be, as a video maker, I mean, hitting 2,000 subscribers on YouTube's a highlight for me. I can't believe that there are 2,000 people who want to watch what I do, and you're not all here because of the naturism video, so some of you are actually here for the poetry, so that's amazing. But genuinely my proudest moment was I was at a poetry night in Bristol a few weeks ago, and I was outside, I was having a ciggy and talking to a couple of poets, and there was this one poet, they're someone that I know by face and I follow them on social media, and I sort of recognised them but I couldn't remember their name, but I've seen their face on my home feed and stuff like that before, and someone introduced us and they went, "Oh, I know Josie, she makes amazing videos, I follow her videos, I wrote a pantoum because of her videos." And that was really cool. That was a really proud moment for me. It can be, especially in the last, in the last year and a half, it feels like you are shouting into the void sometimes. Like, getting comments and stuff is lovely, but it can't help feeling like you're making videos for no one. And so to hear someone who's like, watch my videos and likes them so much that they've written a poem because of it, that was pretty cool. If you weren't writing poetry, what other writing projects would you be drawn to? I don't know, man. I don't know if I would be doing any other writing projects if I wasn't writing poetry. I always joked that I didn't have the patience to write a novel. But I just don't have the staying power on a particular idea. I don't think my ideas are in depth enough to write a novel. Not a good one anyway. And I asked my husband what he thought, and he said that maybe script writing, because he's like, oh, because you write the scripts for all your videos. And I think, yeah, but I don't like it. I write the scripts for my videos because this is unscripted, this video, and it's probably way too long. Oh yeah, but I don't write scripts. So I think it would either be short stories, love a short story, or non-fiction. I think I would write non-fiction because I like education and stuff like that. So I think if I wasn't writing poetry, I'd probably be writing essays, which I know sounds really boring, but it's true. I don't think I could ever write a novel. Even though I love fantasy and I love world building, I like reading those things. I'm not sure I like creating those things. My camera died halfway through. It is now much later in the evening. And guess what? I still haven't even finished cutting out my pattern. So that's great. This is going to take so long. And this is just for the top. I haven't even made stuff for the bottoms yet. So, woo! So the next question is it true that there's a point on a man's head where if you shoot it, it will blow up? No, I'm gonna have to say it again. Is it true that there's a point in a man's head where if you shoot it, it will blow up? I don't know. You'll have to ask Sergeant Angel. There, Kif, I answered your question. Is that okay? So the next question is, how important is form in modern poetry? And I would argue that form is everything in poetry, modern or not. But I think what you mean is how important are poetic forms such as sonnets and stuff like that. And I would argue that for a lot of contemporary and modern poetry, there's a lot more free-flowing stuff, but form still has its place in contemporary poetry. People still definitely write in forms. And I would also argue that like there are new forms coming to exist every day, like a list poem is very popular at the moment, like a golden shovel is a new form of poetry. I've made a video on that. So there's lots of things. I would argue that writing in more traditional forms like sonnets or villanelles are pretty good, or pantoums, sestinas make me want to gouge my own eyes out, but writing in these specific forms is really useful for sharpening the tools of your trade as a poet. So whilst you might choose in your poetic writing not to write in a form, I definitely recommend trying to write in those forms, not necessarily for poems that you're going to publish or share with the world, but just as a sort of writing practice for sharpening your craft. I think every poet should try it, whether you're spoken word, performance, I honestly think rappers would be amazing at traditional forms, which is why rappers are the most talented. Anyway, yeah, so I think form is important in contemporary poetry. I think form is everything. And I think for like context going forward, I think form is an interesting word because it can be used to mean traditional poetic forms like sonnets, or it can be used to mean purely how the poem is presented on the page. So the way you use line breaks is form. The way you use rhyme is form. So whether you mean to or not, you are always writing in a form. Choosing to write a prose poem is form. So form is everything in poetry, and form and its relationship to content is everything. So yeah, thanks for the question. How many iterations of a poem do you go through until you know it's the one? For me personally, infinite. I don't think a poem is ever truly finished. I have poems that have been made into videos and shared on Tinternet, and I don't think they're done. I think there are always elements to be improved. So I would say that it's less to do with the number of iterations and more to do with when the publishing deadline is. There you go. That's my opinion on how many iterations it takes. The next question is, does it ever feel embarrassing sharing your poetry, or is it just me? So it depends on the context. I know that like when I've made my how to write a poem videos and then I read it at the end of the video, I find that embarrassing because it's literally like the first draft. I've made the video and written the poem in one day and I haven't really done much editing, so that can be embarrassing. But like, I am a performance poet, so I don't find reading my poems to people that embarrassing, although I have to say like a one-on-one situations, that's embarrassing. That's obviously embarrassing, right? Everyone finds that embarrassing. Like, hey guys, I got a new poem and I'd love to hear your feedback on it. Or like, hey, I just wrote a new poem, do you want to read it? And then you're sat there while they're reading it. That's embarrassing. But kind of just have to get over that in order to get feedback, don't you? Do you ever get a period of writer's block, and what do you do to get the mojo back? Yeah, in one right now, pal. And to get it back, I think reading is great, and it doesn't have to be poetry, but I think like absorbing art in any way is great inspiration. So I read books, I watch TV, I go to poetry events, and I watch other people. I always have my phone on me, whether I was a poet or not, so I write notes in my phone. For a period earlier this year, I was writing every day for 15 minutes. That was a really cool thing to try. Just pick a random subject and free write for 10 minutes. Also, when I am in the zone, I always write down prompts for myself of like poems that I want to come back to and want to write. So yeah, that's how I deal with it. I cannot believe that there are 2,000 of you. It's very exciting. Thank you for the people who have been here from the beginning. Thank you to all my newcomers, and comment below what videos you want to see from me in the future. I think definitely one of the series that I want to start doing is analysing poems and like annotating them to help people who are studying poetry. If that's something that you think sounds cool, let me know in the comments, but also comment a poem or a song or whatever that you think I should annotate. Yeah, that's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you found the answers to this useful, and I will see you next week for another video about poetry, probably. Thanks so much for watching. You can support the channel by joining my Patreon or buying me a coffee. Patrons get access to monthly writing workshops, as well as feedback on your poems and badges, so that's worth considering. Please do check that out. All the links are in the description. And while we're on the subject, why don't you follow me on social media? I am at Josie Alford Poet on all the things. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you all next week. Bye.